When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense. Like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.
I even had a gift receipt.
Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another show. We have Chris Daly, who has a blog on Jamaicans.com, and his blog is Me Thinking Are You. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Janice. We have a wonderful guest this evening. We have Mr. Dennis Chung. Dennis hails from Jamaica. He was born in Kingston, raised for significant years in Mandeville, and now he is residing in Kingston. He's earned a master's degree in accounting in the University of West Indies, Jamaica, and is a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Jamaica. Mr. Chung runs his own company and guest lectures on economic issues at the University of New Orleans. He has written a column in the Financial Gleaner and then Jamaican Observer since 1993 till now. He has also a website. It's www.minduhbusiness.com. That's MINDUHUH. YUH.
Yes.
BUISINESS.com. And this website is dedicated to providing financial and business advice to individuals and to small businesses. He also does a blog, and that's DCJottins at blogspot.com. That's DCJottins at blogspot.com. Dennis is an author of the book Charting Jamaica's Economic and Social Development, a much-needed paradigm shift. Welcome, Dennis, to our conversation this evening.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Well, let's open talking about your book. When I've opened your book, I'm left with two emotions. I sense of fears, impatience, and a sense of hopefulness. You want Jamaica to move fast very quickly because you see its potential. How do you balance these two elements?
Yeah, well, I'm impatient because I think that we have not developed for too long, and I think that we should have been developing since independence. You know, there was a lot of hopefulness, a lot of hope in 1962, as I gather, since I wasn't born then. And we really have not achieved the hope and the dream that we've set out. And I also believe that Jamaica has a whole lot of potential. I mean, we only have to look at the individual performances in music, like a Bob Marley, in sports, like a Usain Bolt, and, you know, the list can go on and on about the great things that Jamaicans can achieve. And what you notice is that they've achieved it individually. Can you imagine if we were all to get together and move the country forward in a very uniform way, a very positive way, a team building way? I mean, can you imagine how great Jamaica is? Because with all its problems, I mean, on the world stage, Jamaica is still a very, very strong brand.
Amen. That's super. When you wrote this book, I know you're writing for the younger generation. Your son is very prominent in the forward, but you have a wider audience. Who can best be served by your book? What did you have in mind when you wrote this book?
Well, I had the average Jamaican in mind. I mean, I myself, I'm not an economist, and what I've been doing really is really using my accounting skills to sort of crunch the numbers to provide an objective place as to where we are. And I think it's written in as simple language as possible so that the average man on the street can understand it, because I think that change is going to come from an education of the masses. What I'm trying to do is start a dialogue, start a debate, so that we can push the change, because change does not necessarily, it has never really come from leaders. Leaders have always been pushed by the average citizen, and that is the person that I'm trying to get to with this book, both by them reading it and by debating it, starting a debate from it. So a lot of people I know have read it. I've just walking on the road or driving. The average citizen on the roads, a lot of people, will say to me, "Boy, Mr. Chung, we've read this article or we've read the book." So I think that the message is getting to people, and hopefully, it can have a snowball effect where ideas and solutions come to the minds of the people, so that we can push the leaders to change in the direction that we want it to.
It's very quite evident. And I like your approach. And if you folks, as you read this book, is very illustrative with charts and tables, just to give you a sense of where we are. And it's done in a really neat manner. And his content is issued in training. And usually, as you said, you'd like to start a conversation with the masses and then bubble up. So a social change would have to take place for this thing to happen, as opposed to just looking at the number crunching. You're trying to start a conversation here and excite someone's imagination for what's possible.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. It's very important, I think, for us to get people focusing on these things. I mean, when I look at Jamaica, I was very surprised the other day to find out that the best-selling newspaper is actually the Star.
Really?
No, we can't get ahead by reading the Star.
Okay.
The Star
and
is
for
all
those,
about gossip.
and for those of you who are in the diaspora that don't know the what's in the Star, it's could you tell them it's more of a tabloid type of paper, isn't it?
The Star is like a tabloid paper, and it really focuses more on tabloid stuff. What's happening with this person, or
right.
some outlandish.
The gossip column.
It's a gossip column. It's similar to the Star. In the U.S. they have a Star. Right. And it has the same sort of thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So, I'm trying to get people to be more aware, and for us as Jamaicans to take more responsibility for our country and our country's future, rather than leave it up to politicians and the government, because, the change will never come from them. I mean, they've been doing this thing since 1962. And we've not been getting any better. So I want people to get more aware. I want people to get more involved. And I think it's happening. I mean, along with not just the literature, but also the talk shows that are happening now in Jamaica. I think people are becoming more aware. People are demanding a lot more in terms of progressive action from our leaders. So, I'm hoping that it won't take a long time to really develop. But I see signs of it, and it's something that is talked and written about.
All right. Well, given that, lay out for our audience the 3 top challenges from your perspective that the country of Jamaica faces.
Number 1, discipline. Discipline in terms of adhering to structure, in terms of adhering to law and order. Number 2, it's crime. We have to control the crime situation, which is very strongly linked to discipline. And number 3, I would think, is the fact that we don't produce enough. We're really just a trading company. in the context of a country. We're actually, for the past 46 years, we've run a fiscal surplus of 12 years of those 46 years. So we continuously spend more than we earn. So those are the three main challenges that Jamaica faces. And if we were to fix those things, then I think we would fix all the social and economic issues that we have.
Okay, and if you will just give us at a high level, the three drivers that would give us some giddy and kickstart Jamaica on its journey back to greatness.
Well, I think we need to pay attention to the little things in terms of the discipline. It's not about first going at solving the crimes, the complicated crimes like murders, but getting the discipline back on the roads, getting the discipline back in terms of night noise, getting the discipline back in terms of environmental protection. So that's one. Number two, I think if we were to create a more facilitative environment for small businesses to flourish, so that we cut out the bureaucracy more than anything else, I think that would also have a very great impetus. And number three, I think, is we need to understand that Jamaica is not about the Jamaica Labour Party or the People's National Party. It's Jamaica, and
Amen.
We can't. If you support someone who is in the PNP or in the JLP, then you're aligned to that party today. And if you support someone in the other party tomorrow, then you're aligned to that party tomorrow. So there does not seem to be any Jamaicans, but rather JLP and PNP. And once we can move beyond that, I think that would be a very significant development for us.
So you said social change. In most history is taught that social change, there's a political component to it, but the current one that we're practicing is not allowing us. It puts us in a stalemate position. Mm-hmm. What are some of the effective changes that you can see to the political structure that we have that will make it not an impediment but an engine for change?
Well, I think we need to move away from the Westminster model. The Westminster model works well in the United Kingdom because they have over 600 members of parliament, of which about 120 form the government, which means that there's another about 500 members of parliament that sits on the backbenches and in the opposition. So there is a strong opposition to government if government steps out of line. In Jamaica, what we have is about 30 or 31 members of parliament on the government side, of which almost all of them form government. So who opposes them? So I don't think that system works in a small state like Jamaica. We need to move to a system like what's in the United States, which is a constitutional republic, where the executive is different from the elected members that sit in the House, so that there's a separation of power. And I think that if we were to do that, then it would bring greater accountability because people are not conflicted in terms of their roles as members of parliament and their roles as government. Right. And it would be greater representation to the people. So if we were to do that, I think that in itself would help to fix the political process more than anything else, and that would usher in a new social era in terms of the change that we need for people to be truly represented and not conflicted in government.
Just as a follow-up to that, I've heard that there's some changes to the Constitution being, as far as the structure being contemplated. Do you know if any of these ideas are on the table?
It was talked about in early years, but nothing much has happened with it. There has been one or two calls for it to come back on the table. But the truth is that it's not really something that governments are interested in at the moment because it really can work against governments. But I'm hoping that it will at some point in time very shortly come back on the table and be finally pushed through. I think people will have to make a cry out for it to happen. And, one or two people have been doing that. But one of the biggest issues that we face now that people have been more concerned about is crime. So, it has sort of taken a backseat. But it's still a very important piece of legislation that needs to come in play. And, hopefully we can resolve the other major issues and get to that as soon as possible.
Your fine work is very contemporary. It addresses the present economic meltdown that the entire globe is involved in and hopes of providing a roadmap to recovery. One of the Achilles heels of Jamaica has been its debt. Debt burden has always been a drag. And I saw a recent cartoon that depicted the Prime Minister trying to bail out a small boat, and there's this large shark of a boat, the IMF, lurking in the background. Can you speak to the role that you've seen on the IMF and our debt situation?
Yeah, well, I think that the government will have to go to the IMF. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I've been saying from last year that, we should have tried to go from last year and sort of put an insurance policy in place because the debt situation is rather very serious. And it's not because of the level of debt. We tend to focus a lot on the level of debt, but debt is good as long as the marginal return on debt is greater than the marginal cost. Okay. What has happened to us is that we have always spent our debt on consumption, which does not give you a value added. So that has gotten us into the situation that we are in today. And we're presently facing a serious debt crisis because we're paying 56 cents out of each dollar to debt servicing, which leaves little for spending on Jamaica and the Jamaican population. So it's a very, very serious challenge. I believe that the IMF will give us some breathing space, but it won't solve the challenges really, because we really do need a lot of money. So I think we'll have to look more towards changing our cultural habits in relation to our consumption. For example, our consumption of oil, which I think is the biggest plus that we can get, because when oil was at $30 a barrel, oil made up 23% of imports. So at $70 a barrel, you can imagine where it is now. So that's our biggest gain. So there are a few things that we can do. For example, putting a good public transportation system in place might save us maybe $300 million US for the year. Things like getting more productivity into agriculture. So our debt is going to be fixed by our policy actions and not necessarily by the IMF, who is really just going to give us some breathing space. It's like a man who's drowning, and right. The IMF throws you a raft or something to float with, but you're drowning still.
Yeah, but so you're saying the monies that we get from the IMF should be earmarked towards investment more than consumption.
Yeah, we need. Well, the IMF is really a balance of payment support. What I'm saying is, we're going to get that money from the IMF, and we're going to use it to shore up our NIR and use it for balance of payment support. Money is fungible, so money will find its way into the system. But what we need to do is refocus a lot of the current resources that we have. For example, as I said, if we were to put in place a good transportation system, then that in itself frees up a lot of money for us to use. If we also were to control the crime situation, then we would have people putting in a lot of private capital into investment.
It would be a magnet more than a...
Right. So the money from the IMF is really just going to ensure that our balance of payment situation is supported. But it's our policy actions, our fiscal policy actions, that is going to drive investment into productive areas, and also ensure that we reduce our trade deficit. and that will then flow through to the fiscal accounts and reduce the fiscal deficit. So that is really what we need to focus on in reducing our debt, and not necessarily the IMF, because that money is not going to come in to pay off debt. It's really just there as a balance of payment support.
It's a bridge over troubled waters of sorts.
Yes.
Okay. Your book also suggests another policy action, the one of divesting itself of or privatizing certain institutions like Air Jamaica, some of the sugar countries, the Cayman Islands, Track Limited, and some of other government-held institutions. If this should occur, who would own these assets? And you suggested we know we'd get some infusion of foreign capital, but how do we balance the infusion of foreign capital who may have different desires on our monies than the sustainable development of Jamaica?
Well, I believe that there is some capital in Jamaica, and certainly you might see some of the capital from the local capital going into some of these entities. But the real capital that you need, it means that there's going to have to be some foreign partnership. Now, the factor is that the reason why we still need overseas investors to come in is because we've squandered our own resources locally. I mean, in the 1990s with FinSAC, local capital was generated. So, there's really not much local capital available. So, regrettably, we're still going to have to go to get foreign investors to come in, which is we should not be doing this really at our stage of development as a nation, but because we've wasted our resources as a country, then we still have to do that. But it's a stepping stone. We need to ensure that when it comes in, that it is being used in a value-added way, so that we're benefiting from it, and that the capital that's built up locally in the future, that we don't destroy that again. Because the only way that we can really develop is if locals invest. But we're at the point now where locals have been destroyed in the 1990s, and there's not much more local capital here. So we're still going to have to go that route.
One of the ideas I heard floating around is this idea of a diaspora bond, where as your book clearly stated, there's as many Jamaicans living outside of the U.S., outside of the country than are in, that still have a vested tie to the island. Do you have a take on I guess this kind of instrument for capital raising have been used successfully in Israel and in India, in tying them back to their native country? Do you have a perspective on that idea?
Yeah, well, I mean, the diaspora is an investor just like anybody else, and if you're going to have a difficulty raising money on the capital markets, then how are you going to get money from the diaspora? The diaspora has worked just as hard for its money like anybody else. So, what is really needed is that we need to ensure that the investment in Jamaica is attractive, and then maybe we can appeal more successfully to the diaspora, because we've gotten rid of things like crime and the obstacles to investments, the bureaucracy. But as a diaspora person, are you just going to put your hard-earned money into an investment just because you're a Jamaican? I don't think so.
There is some evidence that because it's not the monetary gain is secondary to the bonding that that person has with their native land, and so if it's larger than just the monetary gain, that they may free up some funds, and so there's some tight bonds, say, between the U.S. and Israel, and even from India. That's why that's being considered at some length.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand the concept of it, but if someone is going to do that, then they have to have the confidence that their investment is going to be safe. I mean, if you look at India or Israel, I mean, those economies, they don't suffer from the same situation like we do. You know, we have a higher murder rate than Colombia. We have a significant crime situation. For example, Pradia last me in agriculture. You know, we have a situation where someone stole a whole beach. You know, I mean, I think that even people in the diaspora want to know that even though they love Jamaica, that their money is safe.
You're right.
You know, so I mean, we have to clean up those things first. You know, I don't think it makes sense going to the diaspora without first showing that you're really serious about your actions. I mean, even when you're begging, you wouldn't expect to get money from someone if you beg money to go and buy drugs. So, you know, I think those are some of the first things we need to do. We need to show that we're serious. And I think the diaspora would be doing Jamaica a favor by saying, listen, I will do this, but show me first what you're going to do. You know, I think the diaspora also has that responsibility.
So the diaspora plays a role of accountability.
Yeah, yes, and the diaspora is a very powerful voice. I mean, the diaspora makes I saw in your note about $40 billion a year. No, I mean, that's very powerful. I mean, this is the opportunity that the diaspora has to say, listen, we will do this, but this is what we want in return as investors. You know, you hear stories of people coming down here and sending money down to buy a house.
Welcome to another show.
Strong voice if you come together to speak to not only the government but the other powers that be in the private sector and so forth. I think the government is trying its best. The diaspora can also bring back a lot of ideas. I mean, you're living in countries where the things that we're trying to implement is actually working already. You know, so it's not just a matter of bringing back money; it's a matter of also bringing ideas to us. You know, what we if you think about it, one of the things the diaspora has always been doing is also bringing back, you know, free medical service and this sort of thing. I think we need more than that because that is really giving us a fish rather than teaching us how to fish.
Right. So the intellectual horsepower needs to be a part of the diaspora's contribution. Exactly.
That is a very, very critical part that's needed and which we really have not been getting. And with this, in this day and age of, you know, technology and the internet, there's so much ways that information can get back to us. You know, whatever you see that is good in Jamaica, it's always good to celebrate it, you know, even from where you are. So if you do that, then, you know, it has a more powerful voice than that one or two person crying out in Jamaica. So if you do that, you know, encourage the behavior and also influence the behavior by your own intellectual contributions, I think it has a lot more.
For your fine insight, how would people get a hold of this really fine work that you've produced?
It's on Amazon. You know, Amazon is far-reaching today, so it takes like about 3 or 4 days to get to you. So, you know, anyone who wants a copy can just go onto Amazon, type
and repeat the title for us again for the folks.
Charting Jamaica's Economic and Social Development, a much-needed paradigm shift.
Oh, and also, if you go to JamaicanDiaspora.com and click Caribbean Culture Store, the book is on sale right there as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dennis,
and
much for your finance. Go ahead, Janice.
Oh, Dennis, could you repeat your website again? It's Mind Your Business.
Mind Your Business, and it Mind Your Business, and if you're familiar with the Jamaican dialect, YUH is actually your.
Okay.
So right, so it's really Mind Your Business, but we use a Jamaican dialect, which is Mind Your Business. YUHMINDYUH
And your website and your blog site is?
My blog is dcjottings.blogspot.com.
And Chris, if we'd like to learn about your blog, where do we go?
If you go to Jamaicans.com, and you'll see my blog post on Me Thinking Are You, and that's at blogs.jamaicans.com/me thinking. That's TINKING, following the spirit of Dennis's language.
Of the Jamaican dialect, yes. This was definitely a good interview, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense, like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.
I even had a gift